The morning Nathan Cole walked into that boardroom on the 43rd floor of Meridian Tower, he had already rehearsed the moment 10,000 times in his head. He had imagined it on cold nights in a one-room apartment in Houston when he was 22, and had nothing but hunger and ambition keeping him warm. He had imagined it while driving a delivery truck across state lines at 25, eating gas station sandwiches, and listening to business audiobooks through cracked earbuds. He had imagined it at 30, when his first real investment paid out and he stood in a parking garage alone and cried into his jacket collar because there was no one to call. And he had imagined it at 34, the night Meridian Capital acquired his company for a number that had 7 figures and a comma that still did not feel real. Yet he had imagined this moment in all of those versions of his life, but not once in all of that imagining had he pictured her sitting at the other end of the table. Nathan stopped in the doorway. Just for a second. Just long enough for his chest to do something that had no business happening in a professional setting. His assistant, a young man named Derek, who trailed him with a tablet and a schedule, nearly walked into his back. "Mr. Cole?" Derek said. "Give me a second," Nathan said. He stood there and looked at her. She was thinner than he remembered. Her hair, which had always been dark and thick and pinned back in that no-nonsense way she favored, was silver now at the temples and pulled into a clean, professional bun. She wore a navy blazer. Reading glasses sat low on her nose. She was looking at papers in front of her and had not yet glanced up toward the door. Her name was on the agenda in his hand. Ruth Elaine Hale, senior consultant, Walker Hale Advisory Group. His mother. His mother who had not heard his voice in 16 years. His mother who, 3 days after his father's funeral, had asked him to stay just a little longer, just until she was stronger, just until the bills were figured out, just until... And he had kissed her forehead and told her he would call from the road. He had not called. Not that first week, not that first month, not in the first year or the years that followed. He had told himself 100 different lies and 100 different voices about why. The distance, the shame, the momentum of a life moving forward so fast that looking back felt dangerous. What the way one silence becomes 2 and then 10 and then a wall so thick you cannot imagine being the person who tears it down. He had not called. And now she was sitting 12 feet away from him in a boardroom in Chicago, about to consult on the very deal that was supposed to be the crowning achievement of his career. She had not recognized him yet. He took a breath. He straightened his jacket. He walked into the room. Welcome back. If you are watching this channel for the first time, this is a place where we tell stories that stay with you. Stories about choices, about time, about the things we carry and the things we leave behind. Get comfortable. This one is going to take you somewhere. To understand what Nathan Cole became, you have to understand what Nathan Cole left. He grew up in a small town called Carthage, now in the hill country of central Tennessee. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone's business and where the same families had been sitting in the same church pews for 3 generations. His father, Robert Cole, had worked at a local machine parts factory for 29 years and had died the same year he was supposed to retire. Heart attack. November morning. He was still in his work boots. Nathan was 22 when his father died. His mother, Ruth, was 51. She had worked as a school administrator for the county for 2 decades. Steady, dependable, respected. But she had a condition. Lupus. Nothing catastrophic yet, the doctors said. Manageable, they said. But it required medication, monitoring, careful living. And the factory pension his father had counted on was less than anyone had expected. And the mortgage on the house had 7 years left on it. And the medical bills from his father's last 3 days in the hospital arrived 2 weeks after the funeral, like a second death. Ruth handled all of it with the particular grace of a woman who had learned a long time ago not to let the room see her bend. But Nathan saw. He saw the way she sat at the kitchen table after midnight with the calculator out and her reading glasses pushed up her forehead and a cup of tea gone cold beside her. He saw the way she smiled too quickly when he asked if she was okay. He saw the stack of envelopes on the counter that she flipped face down when he came into the room. He saw it. And he loved her. He truly loved her. But he had a fire in him that Carthage, Tennessee could not contain. He had always had it, that urgent, more restless certainty that his life was meant to happen somewhere else, at a bigger scale, in rooms that smelled like money and ambition instead of motor oil and casserole. His high school teachers had told him he was smart. A business professor at the community college had told him he had a rare kind of mind. He had read every book he could find about entrepreneurs who had started with nothing. He had believed, with the faith of a young man who has never yet been seriously broken, that he was one of them. And so when his mother said, "Stay, just a little while, just until I get my footing," he had heard the words. He had felt the weight of them. He had pressed his lips to her forehead and smelled her hair and felt, for one long moment, the full pull of what she was asking. And then he had put his bag in the car. Yet he told himself it was temporary. He told himself he would get to Houston, get set up, get moving, and then send money. He told himself that taking care of himself first was not abandonment. It was strategy. He told himself that a successful Nathan was more useful to his mother than a stuck Nathan. He told himself all the things a young man with ambition tells himself when he is choosing ambition over love and needs the choice not to feel like what it is. He drove out of Carthage on a gray Thursday morning. He did not look in the rearview mirror, not because he was hard, but because he knew if he did, he would turn around. The first 2 years in Houston were brutal in ways Nathan had not allowed himself to fully imagine. He worked 4 jobs at the same time in the first 6 months. Delivery driver, warehouse loader, night security at a storage facility, weekend catering staff. He slept 5 hours a night on average. He ate 1 real meal a day. He sent a money order to his mother's address twice. Not enough money. Not nearly enough. And no note with either one because he could not figure out how to write a note without becoming the person who had to explain why he had not called. He told himself he would explain when he had something worth explaining. Months turned. He got his first break in real estate. Not an investment, just a job at a property management firm run by a man named Gerald Marsh, who was loud, demanding, frequently wrong, and occasionally brilliant. Nathan watched Marsh work and learned more in 1 year than he had learned in 4 at the community college. He learned how money moved. He learned how deals were structured. He learned how men who appeared confident made rooms believe in possibilities that had not yet materialized. He also learned that the money order envelopes he sent to Carthage started coming back to him. Return to sender. The first time it came back, he stared at it for a long time. He told himself she had moved. He told himself maybe she had a new address, and he just needed to find it. He did not try very hard to find it. He kept moving forward, because forward was the only direction that had ever rewarded him, and backward was a direction that had started to feel like drowning. He told himself she was fine. She had to be fine. He kept moving. At 27, he started a small real estate investment company out of a shared office space with 2 other men, Marcus Webb, a fast-talking operator from Dallas, and Christine Yee, a quiet, yet precise numbers woman who could find the structural weakness in any deal within 4 minutes of looking at it. The 3 of them had almost no capital and considerable nerve. They bought distressed properties, rehabbed them on tight budgets, and sold them for margins that surprised everyone, including themselves. By 30, the company had 12 employees and a track record. By 32, it had 40 employees and a reputation. By 34, it had attracted the attention of Meridian Capital, one of the largest private equity and advisory firms in the Midwest. And the acquisition offer arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, and Nathan sat with it in his office alone for 2 hours before he called anyone. In those 2 hours, he thought about Gerald Marsh and the property management office where he had learned to read deals. And he thought about Marcus and Christine and the shared office with the broken window air conditioning unit they had named Gerald sarcastically. He thought about the delivery truck and the warehouse and the gas station sandwiches and the 5 hours a night sleep schedule. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, for the first time in years, a face surfaced that he had not allowed himself to look at clearly in a very long time. His mother's face at the kitchen table, calculator out, tea gone cold, glasses pushed up her forehead. Stay, just a little while. He pushed it down. He picked up the phone. He called his lawyer. The Meridian acquisition closed 4 months later. Nathan Cole became, at 34, the kind of man that people wrote short profiles about in trade publications. Sharp, self-made, disciplined. Yet he had a condo in the River North neighborhood of Chicago. He had a seat on 2 advisory boards. He had a tailor. He had a trainer. He had the exact life he had driven out of Carthage, Tennessee, to build. He also had, somewhere beneath all of it, a silence that had grown so large it was no longer a silence, but a presence. He did not date seriously. The women he met were interesting, sometimes brilliant, occasionally beautiful, and he could never quite let any of them past a certain perimeter. His assistant Derek had once, in a moment of unusual candor at the end of a long travel day, told him that he had the energy of a man who had built a moat around himself and then forgotten what was on the inside of it. Nathan had laughed. Derek had not been joking. He had hired a private investigator once, 3 years after the acquisition, and one night at 2 a.m. when the silence had gotten particularly loud. He had typed up a brief, his mother's name, her last known address in Carthage, approximate age, physical description, and sent it with a retainer fee, and felt, for a brief and terrifying moment, like the person he had always been underneath the success. The PI came back with a report 6 weeks later. Ruth Elaine Cole had sold the house in Carthage 8 years ago. She had retained her maiden name, Hale, on professional documents. She had completed a graduate certificate in organizational management through an online program. She had relocated twice, first to Nashville, then to Cincinnati, then back to Tennessee briefly before settling in the Chicago metropolitan area. She was alive. She was working. She had built something for herself. She had not looked for him. I'd as far as the P I could determine. That last line had held Nathan still in his office chair for a very long time. He had not followed up. He had told himself the timing was wrong. He had filed the report in a drawer in his home office. He had closed the drawer and gone back to his life and tried not to count how many times. In the months that followed, he opened that drawer, looked at the folder, and closed it again without reading it. 19 times. He had counted. The Walker-Hale Advisory Group contract had come through Meridian's business development team 3 weeks before the boardroom meeting. Nathan had been in Singapore for a deal when the engagement was finalized, and Derek had handled the paperwork. The assignment was straightforward. Meridian was acquiring a mid-sized logistics company in Ohio, and Walker-Hale had been recommended by 2 board members as the best operational consulting firm in the region for exactly this kind of integration. Top-tier, discreet, effective. Nathan had approved the contract on his phone at a hotel breakfast table in Singapore without reading the attached team bio sheet. He had not known her name would be on it. Or maybe somewhere in the part of him that still stood at closed drawers in the middle of the night, he had known. Yet he would not let himself examine that possibility too closely. And so he stood in that boardroom doorway on a Thursday morning in March, and his mother sat 12 feet away with her reading glasses low on her nose and her silver-templed hair in a clean professional bun and her hands flat on the papers in front of her. And she had not looked up. Nathan walked to the head of the table. He pulled out his chair with the controlled, deliberate movement of a man accustomed to walking into rooms and owning them. He sat. He placed his copy of the agenda on the table. He looked across the long mahogany surface at the 4 people sitting on the consulting side. There was a man in his 40s named Philip Walker. Trim, expensive haircut. The confident posture of a man who had been in rooms like this many times. And there was a young woman who was clearly a junior analyst. There was another man Nathan didn't recognize, and there was Ruth Hale. She had looked up now. She was looking at him the way a professional looks at the person at the head of the table with attentive, neutral interest. Assessing, courteous, ready to work. No recognition. None at all. Nathan was 38 years old. He weighed 20 pounds more than the last time she had seen him, and the weight was muscle, not fat. He was taller than she remembered, or perhaps just held himself differently, the posture of a man who had been carrying himself deliberately for 16 years. His hair was cut close, and there were the beginnings of gray at his temples that mirrored, in a way that made his chest ache. The gray at hers. He had a jawbeard that he had not had at 22. Yet he wore a suit that cost more than the truck he had driven out of Carthage. He was unrecognizable to her. He was completely recognizable to himself. "Good morning," Nathan said. His voice was steady. His voice was always steady. It was the thing he had trained first and hardest, the voice that gave nothing away, that held whatever was underneath it without cracking, that sounded like a man who had never once in his life sat in a delivery truck at 3 a.m. and whispered apologies to the dark. "I'm Nathan Cole. Thank you all for being here." Philip Walker introduced his team. He got to her last. "And this is Ruth Hale, our senior operational consultant. Ruth has 30 years of experience in organizational restructuring and integration management. She's the sharpest mind on the operational side that I've ever worked with. And frankly, the reason we keep getting called back." Ruth Hale gave the small professional smile of a person who has been introduced that way many times and accepts the compliment without requiring it. "Thank you, Philip," she said. And Nathan heard her voice. He had been bracing for it, and it still moved through him like a physical thing. It was the same. It was not the same. Deeper, somehow. The Tennessee softness mostly gone, polished away by years of conference rooms and client presentations. But the way the syllables settled, the particular cadence of a woman who chose her words, that was the same. He had heard that voice reading to him at bedtime, and calling him for dinner, and arguing gently with his father about the grocery budget, and saying, "Stay, just a little while on a gray November morning." He took a breath. He opened the agenda. "Let's start with the operational assessment," he said. The meeting ran 3 hours. Ruth Hale was, exactly as Philip Walker had said, extraordinary. She had clearly gone through the logistics company's operations with the attention of a surgeon. She had a single page of handwritten notes in front of her, and she spoke from those notes as if she had been living inside the target company for a year. She identified 3 structural inefficiencies that Meridian's own due diligence team had missed. She flagged a labor contract provision that had serious implications for the post-acquisition integration timeline. She asked questions that made 2 of Meridian's senior analysts sit up straighter. She was calm. She was precise. She was completely in command of the room. At one point, Philip Walker said something about a projected savings figure, and she shook her head very slightly and said, "That number assumes the Cincinnati distribution hub is operating at full capacity, but their Q3 data shows a recurring maintenance bottleneck that drops output about 12% in the 3rd quarter of every year. Your savings model is optimistic by roughly $400,000 annually unless that is addressed in the integration plan." The room was quiet for a second. "She's right," said Nathan's CFO, a man named Gary Perkins, without looking up from his own spreadsheet. "I know," Nathan said. He was looking at her. She was looking at her notes. He thought about the calculator on the kitchen table. And he thought about the way she had always been the one in the family who could take a pile of numbers and find the truth buried in them, while the rest of them were still arguing about the surface. He thought about how she had wanted to go back to school when he was a teenager, and his father had said they couldn't afford it right now, and she had said okay, and then quietly enrolled in evening courses at the community college anyway, and finished 2 years of coursework without making a big production of it. That was how she had always done things. Quietly, thoroughly, without requiring an audience. 30 years of experience, Philip Walker had said. She had been building this for 30 years. She had been building it while he was gone. That thought arrived in Nathan's chest with a weight that surprised him. He had imagined, back in the years of not thinking about it, that she had simply persisted in Carthage, that she had stayed where he left her, managing and coping and being Ruth, in that house with the mortgage and the calculator and the tea. He had imagined her as static, the way we often imagine the people we leave, frozen at the moment we last saw them, preserved in the guilt memory of a specific morning. He had not imagined this. This woman who had walked into a Chicago boardroom with 30 years of built expertise and a mind that could outrun a room full of people half her age. He had not given her enough credit. He had not given her the chance. The thought was quiet and devastating, the way the most honest thoughts usually are. The meeting broke for lunch at 12:30. The Walker-Hale team went to the small conference annex down the hall. Now Meridian's people filtered out toward the break room. Nathan told Derek he would take his lunch in his office and to hold his calls. He sat at his desk for 11 minutes and did not eat anything. Then he stood up. He went to the window and looked out over Chicago, the gray-green river, the packed streets, the architecture of a city that had never asked where he came from and had not cared. He thought about the PI report in the drawer in his home office. He thought about 19 times opening and closing that drawer. He thought about the Tuesday night 3 years ago when he had typed up the brief at 2 a.m. and what had compelled him to do it at 2 a.m. specifically, and not at 10 a.m. on a sensible Monday like a person in full control of himself. Yet he thought about Philip Walker saying the sharpest mind on the operational side that I've ever worked with. And he thought about a gray November morning and a driveway and a car with a bag in the back of it and a forehead he had kissed and a voice saying, "Stay." He pulled out his phone. He put it away. He pulled it out again. He stood at the window a long time. The afternoon session ran 2 more hours. Ruth Hale was the same in the afternoon as she had been in the morning, precise, calm, completely professional. She did not seem tired. She made 3 additional observations that redirected the conversation each time. She had a quiet authority that was not performed. It came from somewhere earned. Nathan watched her throughout the session with the careful attention of a man trying to understand what he is looking at. He was aware, somewhere at the edge of his professionalism, that he was slightly too aware of her, that he was tracking her movements in the room, the way she held her pen, the way she nodded when she was processing something, the slight forward lean when she was about to make a point she considered important. She had always leaned forward like that. She had done it at the kitchen table when she was helping him with geometry in the 7th grade. She had done it at church when the pastor said something she found intellectually interesting. She had done it at the family table when his father got on a soapbox about something, and she was deciding whether to let him finish or to quietly, devastatingly correct him. He had not thought about those things in years. He had worked very hard not to think about them. He thought about them now and could not stop. Now at 4:15 the meeting concluded. Hands were shaken, follow-up items were assigned. Philip Walker said something warm and professional about looking forward to the next phase. Gary Perkins made a joke that landed mildly. People began gathering their things. Nathan stood at the head of the table as the room cleared. Ruth Hale was the last one from her team to finish packing her materials. She was unhurried about it, sliding papers into a slim leather portfolio with the methodical care of a person who keeps things organized, not as a performance but as a practice. She looked up and found him watching her. She gave the professional smile again. Polite, courteous. "It was a productive session," she said. "I think the integration framework is going to come together well." "It will," Nathan said. "You caught things we missed." "That's the work," she said simply. She was about to turn toward the door. "Ms. Hale." His voice came out quieter than he intended. She paused, turned back. "Could I have a few minutes? I had some additional questions about the Q3 maintenance bottleneck. For context." It was not entirely untrue. "Of course," she said. She set her portfolio on the table and opened it again. The room was empty now. Just the two of them, and the long mahogany table and the Chicago skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind Nathan's head. He did not ask about the Q3 maintenance bottleneck. He stood on the other side of the table and looked at his mother for the first time in 16 years and tried to find a way to begin that did not sound like the worst sentence in the world. But he could not find one. So he said the truest thing he knew. "You built something extraordinary," he said. "Walker Hale, 30 years. The work I saw today, that isn't what comes from a career. That's what comes from a life's dedication." Ruth Hale looked at him with the careful attention of a person receiving a compliment that is slightly larger than the occasion. "Thank you," she said, measured. "It has been work I've loved." "Did you always know this was what you wanted?" The question made her pause, not a professional pause, a personal one, a slight adjustment behind the eyes. "Not always," she said. "I came to it late. Most of the people I work alongside have been in this field their whole careers. I came in at a different angle." A small pause. "Life reroutes you sometimes." "Yes," Nathan said. "Is that what happened to you?" "No," she asked. The professional warmth of someone who can make small talk without really opening a door. "Your career began in Texas, I understand, from the company bio." "Houston," he said. "Yes. Long way from home for most people who end up there." "Tennessee," he said, and the word came out carefully, and he watched her face when it landed. A small thing happened. A slight lift of the head. Not recognition, something older and more instinctive. The way a word from a particular place arrives with an accent of feeling you weren't expecting. "Tennessee," she repeated. "Whereabouts?" Nathan looked at her. He was 38 years old. He was the CEO of a company that had been acquired for 8 figures. He had walked into rooms on 4 continents and had not once, in all of those rooms, felt the thing he felt right now, yet which was a terror so simple and so pure it was almost childlike. "Carthage," he said. The word hit Ruth Hale like a shift in air pressure. She did not move. She did not speak. But something changed in her face. Something subtle and enormous at once, the way a landscape changes when a cloud passes over the sun. She looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time since he had walked into the room that morning, she looked at him not as a client or a professional counterpart, but as a face she was trying to place against something in her own mind. He let her look. He stood very still and let her do the work of it, because it was not his to rush. He watched her eyes move over him. He watched her take in the jaw, the height, the close-cut hair with its new gray. Yet he watched her go somewhere inside herself that she had not expected to go on a Thursday afternoon in a Chicago boardroom. He watched her find something there that frightened her and held her at the same time. Her voice, when it came, was stripped of the professional layer for the first time all day. "What is your name?" she said. Not Nathan Cole, CEO of Meridian Capital, not the name on the agenda. The question was not professional. It was the question of a woman standing at the edge of something she was almost certain of and needed confirmed before she could breathe. "Nathan," he said. A long silence. "Nathan Robert Cole," he said. Ruth Hale pressed her lips together. Her hand, on the portfolio, went very still. The leather case sat between them on the table like something neutral that had no idea what it was witnessing. And she was quiet for long enough that Nathan heard the city outside, the distant sound of traffic, a siren somewhere blocks away, the low mechanical hum of the building around them. "You cut your hair," she said finally. It was such a specific, unexpected thing to say that Nathan felt something open in his chest that had been sealed for a very long time. "I did," he said. "You were always letting it grow too long," she said. "Your father said you were going to look like a musician. He said that more than once. He said it every time he saw you." Another silence. Longer. Ruth Hale looked at her hands. Then she looked at the window. Then she looked at him. 16 years, she said. Not a question. Yes, Nathan said. 16 years, she said again, and the second time the words had weight in them. Not rage, not grief exactly, but something that was both of those things and more. The particular gravity of a woman holding a fact she has carried for a long time and is now setting down in front of the person who made her carry it. I know, Nathan said. Do you? Her voice was very quiet and very even. The evenness was more difficult to hear than anger would have been. Do you know what the first year was like? Do you know what it was to have the hospital billing department calling while I was still trying to remember how to sleep without your father in the house? Do you know what I did with the money orders you sent? I cashed them, and I put the money aside, and I told myself every month that you were going to call, that you were going to explain, that there was going to be a reason that would make sense of all of it. Nathan said nothing, and he did not try to interrupt or explain or soften it. He had not earned that right yet. I waited 1.5 years, she said, and then I stopped waiting and I packed the house and I sold it and I left, because waiting for someone who isn't coming back is a choice you can stop making. She paused. I stopped. You built something better, Nathan said. I did not build it because you left. Her voice carried a flash of something sharp now. I built it in spite of the fact that you left. Those are not the same thing, and I will not let you make them the same thing. You're right, Nathan said immediately. That's not what I meant. I'm sorry. The word sorry sat in the room between them. Ruth Hale looked at him for a long time. You look like him, she said quietly. Your father. More now than you did then. People have started saying that. He would have hated the suit. A pause. He would have been proud of you. Nathan felt that land in a place that nothing had reached in a very long time. Mom, he said. First time he had said the word aloud in 16 years. It came out rougher than he intended, and nothing like the controlled, deliberate voice he had been using all day. Ruth Hale closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. She did not let the tears fall. She had the bearing of a woman who had learned to feel things completely, without performing them, and Nathan recognized that too, from the kitchen table, from the night his father had died, from the gray November morning when he had driven away and she had not chased him. Why now? She asked. Why today? Was this... She paused. Did you know I would be here? Nathan thought about the Singapore breakfast table and the phone and the contract approval. He thought about the drawer in his home office and 19 times. He thought about 2 a.m. and the PI report. I didn't know you would be here today, he said. Not consciously. He stopped. I found out where you were 3 years ago. I had someone look for you. And I read the report, and I found out you were alive and working and had built a life, and then I did nothing with it. Why? Because I didn't know how to be the person who shows up after 16 years and makes it okay. I didn't think that person existed. I thought the distance was too wide. He paused. I think I also thought that if you were doing well, you had already decided you were fine without me. And I was afraid to find out if that was true. Ruth Hale looked at him. I am fine without you, she said. I have been fine without you for a long time. I want you to understand that clearly, because I will not have this conversation under the impression that I have been sitting somewhere broken and incomplete, waiting for you to show up and fix it. Her chin lifted very slightly. I am not that woman. I know, Nathan said. I raised myself back up, she said. I made a career. I built a company. I have a life I am proud of, with people in it who have earned the right to be there. I know, Nathan said again. So whatever you are here for, whatever you think happens next, you need to understand that it is not rescue. It is not repair. She paused. It might be something. I don't know yet what. But it is not those things. I don't want to rescue you, Nathan said. Yeah, you don't need that from me, and you never did. I know that now. I think I knew it then, and I told myself I didn't because it was easier to leave if I thought I was doing it for my own good, rather than against your actual need. He stopped. That was a lie I told myself, and I told it for a long time. The room was very still. Outside, the city moved. Cars and lights and the indifferent machinery of a place that held millions of people and their unfinished stories. I have thought about this conversation, Nathan said, so many times. I had it 100 different ways in my head. I knew all the things I needed to say. The apologies, the explanations, the things I would tell you about what the years were like. He paused. And now you are standing here and every version of the speech I rehearsed sounds like exactly what it is, as a prepared speech. He looked at her steadily. So I am going to say only what is true. I was 22 years old, and I was afraid of being swallowed by a life I hadn't chosen, and I made the most selfish decision of my life, and I drove away from you when you needed me, and I did not come back. And everything I became, every good thing in the last 16 years, was built on that foundation. And I have never been able to stand on what I built without feeling what the foundation was made of. Ruth Hale was quiet. I don't want forgiveness today, Nathan said. I have no right to ask for that. I am not asking for it. He paused. I am asking if there is a door, somewhere. Not today. I understand that today is not the day, but a door. Something that is not a closed wall. Ruth Hale looked at him for a long time. The kind of look that takes the full measure of a person not in the way they are presenting themselves, but in the way they actually are underneath it. Nathan held the look. He did not flinch from it. He had learned in 16 years of boardrooms to hold eye contact. But this was not a boardroom hold. This was a son standing in front of his mother and not looking away. I'm 67 years old, Ruth Hale said finally. Her voice was different now. The professional layer was gone, and underneath it was something Nathan recognized from childhood, the plain, unguarded voice she used in private, the real one. I spent 16 years managing the absence of you. I got good at it. I will not lie and say it didn't leave marks. It left marks. She paused. But I am 67 years old, and I am healthy, and I am working, and my life is full. And I am aware, I have been aware for some time, that the clock on certain things is not as long as we pretend it is. Nathan waited. A door, she said. She turned the word over carefully. Not a solved thing, not a healed thing, not a thing we pretend didn't happen. She met his eyes. A door. Yes, Nathan said. I have questions, she said. Ones that will take more than an afternoon. As many as you need, as many times as you need to ask them. I will not be managed, she said with a quiet firmness. I have dealt with men who manage situations for a living, and I am very good at recognizing when I am being handled. You are the last person I would try to handle, Nathan said. The faintest thing moved at the corner of Ruth Hale's mouth. Not a smile yet. Something that remembered what a smile was. You do look like him, she said again softly. Around the eyes. Is that okay? Nathan asked, and heard that his own voice had lost its professional edge entirely. Ruth Hale looked at her son. This stranger in an expensive suit, who had her husband's eyes and her own chin, and the careful, controlled manner of a man who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time, and no longer knows how to set it down. It is what it is, she said. He's gone. You're here. A pause. For the moment. For longer than the moment, Nathan said. if you'll allow it." She looked at him one more time. Then she picked up her portfolio and held it against her chest and turned toward the door with the unhurried bearing of a woman who had survived the kind of things that would have bent most people and had arrived, through her own work and her own will, at a life of genuine dignity. At the door she stopped. She did not turn around fully. She spoke toward the hallway. "There is a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue," she said, "across from the bridge. I go there on Saturday mornings." A pause. "I am usually there by 8. Nathan stood at the head of the empty boardroom table. "I know where it is," he said. She walked out. He stood in the quiet room for a long time. The Chicago skyline spread out behind him through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The afternoon light had shifted into the early gold of late afternoon, the particular light that makes even a city look briefly tender. Derek appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Cole? Your 4:30 is in the East Conference Room." "Tell them I need 5 minutes," Nathan said. Derek retreated. Nathan stood at the window. He pressed one hand flat against the glass, feeling the cold of it against his palm, and he looked out at the city, and for the first time in 16 years, he let himself feel the full weight of what he had carried, and what it had cost him, and what, perhaps, was not yet entirely lost. He had built the life he had driven toward Carthage to build, and every brick of it was real. He would not tear it down, and he would not pretend the building did not matter. But he understood now, in a way that the 22-year-old version of himself had been too young and too driven and too afraid to understand, that a life built only outward eventually echoes in its own hollow, that what you leave behind does not simply stay where you left it, that the people we dismiss as obstacles to our ambition are often, when we turn around decades later, the people who outbuilt us at the things that actually last. His mother had built something, not because he left, in spite of the fact that he left. She had done it with the same material he had used: time, discipline, grief, will, and she had done it without the need to be recognized for it, without a trade publication profile, without a condo in River North or a tailor or an acquisition story. She had done it with a calculator at a kitchen table at midnight when the bills were too high and the house was too quiet, and the son she had asked to stay had driven away in the dark. He owed her more than Saturday coffee. He knew that. And he also knew, and this was perhaps the most important thing he had understood in a very long time, that what he owed her was not money or rescue or redemption performed for an audience of one. What he owed her was patience, consistency, the willingness to be present in the unglamorous, repetitive, quiet way that love actually works, not as a dramatic return, but as an ordinary showing up. Saturday mornings. Questions answered honestly. The acknowledgement, repeated as many times as she needed it, that what happened was real, and that it mattered, and that the man sitting across the table from her was not the 22-year-old who had driven away, but something older, and if she could find the space to believe it, something genuinely trying to be better. It was not a story with a clean ending. Real stories rarely are. But it was a door. And Nathan Cole, who had been standing on the outside of that door for 16 years, had been handed the chance, not the certainty, not the pardon, but the chance to learn whether a man who abandoned the most important thing in his life could spend whatever time remained becoming someone worthy of what had survived in spite of him. He took his hand off the cold glass. He straightened his jacket. He went to his 4:30 meeting. And on Saturday morning, at 7:58, he walked into a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue, across from the bridge, in the early pale light of a March morning. He ordered a coffee. He found a table by the window, and he waited. There is a thing that time does to pride. It does not break it cleanly. It does not arrive all at once with a lesson wrapped in it. It works slowly, the way water works on stone, not visibly, not dramatically, but continuously, year after year, decision after decision, success after success, that somehow leaves a room in you that the success was never shaped to fill. And one day you are sitting in a coffee shop in the early morning light of a city you built yourself into, and the door opens, and the person you left behind walks in, and you understand, with the clarity of a thing that arrives too late and just in time simultaneously, that the greatest achievement of your life was never anything you built. It was something you almost let die. And some doors, not all, but some, stay open long enough for you to walk back through. If you are willing to walk slowly, if you are willing to be accountable, if you are willing to let the person you hurt lead the pace, and if you have the humility to understand that being allowed back into someone's life is not a reward for success, it is a grace you have to learn to deserve. If this story moved you, if it made you think about someone you have been meaning to call or a door you have been afraid to walk back through, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. The clock on certain things is not as long as we pretend it is. See you in the next story.